Hello, my name is Zachariah Schmidt, and I am the Communications Coordinator and Assistant Administrator at Lakeview Lutheran Church here in Chicago. Welcome to the fifth episode of Lakeview Listens, and I am here today with my dear friend Suhail Tikoo. Suhail, welcome. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for the invite. I'm super excited to be here.
Yep. I've known Suhail for not too long, about a year and a half, but he's a partner of one of my very close friends from high school, and we've just gotten to know each other over the past year and a half, and I'm very much looking forward to talking with you today. So why don't we just jump right in? Can you tell me, or I already know some things about you, but for everyone else who doesn't know you, can you tell us just a little bit about yourself, kind of where you're from, how long you've been in Chicago, what you do, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I'll try to give uh, you a sort of a bird's view of what my life has been in a nutshell. I grew up in a town called Jammu, which is Jammu and Kashmir, which is in India. That's if you're thinking geographically for all those enthusiasts, it's the northernmost state of India. Fairly controversial state vis-a-vis politically and geographically, because there's always a battle going on whether it should be independent or should it be with Pakistan or India, so on and so forth. Each country maintains that it's theirs. So growing up, it was a lot of how should I say? You were trained to be very mindful of your surroundings, and I think that I still carry that with me all through these years, even though we're not living in as dangerous territories. So yeah, growing up in a small nuclear family, I did my schooling in Jammu. Uh, Unlike you switching schools here in America, I essentially went through the same school first through 12th grade, and then did my undergrad in engineering, which is electronics engineering, with down south, which is Bangalore, which is the Silicon Valley of India. Quick little note here to Indian parents. Uh, Most of the Indian parents, not all, but most, and for my parents certainly, I could be three things coming out of high school. I could be an engineer, I could be a doctor, or I could be a disappointment. So I was this close to being a disappointment, but then I just worked hard to become an engineer, and that's what I did. And then worked there for a few years, not in the field that I got trained for. And as soon as I was about to hit 25, had a quarter life crisis, and I thought, oh, how do I get out and what do I do with my life? So two countries popped to my head, Germany and United States of America. And based on the subject that slightly interested me, which eventually became the topic of my master's degree, I chose America and I landed in Arizona, where I stayed for 4.5 years, um, 2 year and a half of which was master's school, then 2.5 years of working, and then landed back in Chicago for another job in tech, where I work right now. I work as a Salesforce consultant. I This term consultant may make it sound like I work as a third party consultant and come in and solve problems. But what companies have started to do, especially tech ones, is they started to have these internal consultants. So you're with the company full time and you just help all the different divisions get their work done when it comes to information systems. So that's pretty much my life these days, work wise,
Great.
anyways.
Sure. Yeah, great. So a lot of stuff there. I want to go back to just what you said at the very beginning. Your home, it's a state or a city, or is it kind of both?
It is a city, and then the name of the state has the city's name baked into it. So
Okay.
this state is called Jammu and Kashmir, and Jammu and Kashmir are their own individual cities. I guess Kashmir is not even a city. Kashmir is
Mhm.
just a name. Jammu is definitely a city.
Mhm. Gotcha. Okay. And you said you grew up with there being this sort of big conflict, being really kind of ever present in your life. Can you kind of talk about some of the ways that this conflict impacted you day to day, in your life and your family's life? What did that look like?
I think I'll before I delve into how it affected me, I like to share a little bit of how it affected my family. So my family grew up in
Mm,
Kashmir. So we're an ethnic minority in the region. And in 1990, just 2 years before I was born, there was huge, I would say, civil unrest or genocide, what do you want to call it. So my community was essentially targeted, and we're being essentially what happens in a ethnic cleansing, right? You get killed if you remain there. Women have physical atrocities happening on them, so it's fairly brutal. And my parents and the whole of my community had to essentially run away. So they ran away to different parts of the country. Jammu had the most majority people from that region. Kashmir, because it was the next best city, which had favorable demographics, and the rest spread to different parts of the world and mostly different parts of the country. So having that background in mind, whenever I grew up, I noticed a sense of my parents always being very, very wary of what's going on in the surroundings. I guess you
mm,
could chart it up to their fear of how their neighbors turned on them, how the city, what they call love, which was called home for them, all of a sudden was taken away from them. My dad at that moment was in a different city than Kashmir when it actually happened, and he was fully planning on going back to Kashmir, building a house there, and living like raising us and the rest of the family. But overnight, 40 people showed up at his doorstep because they had nowhere else to go. So I
mm,
think that was more of a personal front what happened with my community. And the second thing was because again, as I said, Jammu and Kashmir is a conflicted state. You were always on high alert, medium to high alert, medium alert on any regular days. Like anytime you could go to a public place, you would hear announcements saying that if you go to a railway station, if you go to an airport, if you go to a very crowded market, or if there is a big event coming up, which they anticipate a lot of people getting together, one of the first public safety announcements would be if you find somebody acting suspicious, if you find a piece of equipment lying there and nobody is claiming it, alert someone. So I'm always trained, and that hasn't left me till this date. Anywhere I go, there is a lot of people, and then there is a stuff or a bag just randomly lying around. There's part of me that gets very anxious about it. That, oh my God, what's happening?
mm.
I've learned to calm it down because not every region is the same. And things have improved in Jammu as well. But that's the kind of situation I grew up on.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, that's a lot. There's a lot there. I think, and I've kind of thought about this before. When when you hear about these big conflicts happening outside of the state. I mean, Israel Palestine is a really big one right now,
Mhm.
but just how much unrest there is um, outside of the country that we're in now, and not that there's incredible amounts of unrest and turmoil in America right now. But I
Mhm.
think for a lot of white Americans, myself included, there's just you're not subject to that unrest and that turmoil on a day-to-day basis that I think so much of the world is subject to. So yeah, I can't really imagine having to live with that in your system, to have that be part of your family's history, and to carry that with you for your family, to carry that for generations and generations.
No, 100%. It's just, I didn't even fully fathom the impact of it as I became an adult. Uh, I I would certainly uh, think that my relatives or people of my community were being overtly scared. They were careful about everything, and I would always think in my head, like, why are they so uptight? Why are they so worried? Why does everything need to be questioned? And a lot of it, I think it's still just the way they were raised, but also most of it was just the trauma, which has because therapy is not something that people would consider. My parents say to even consider, not even now, even though they have some awareness of it. So it's just unresolved trauma manifesting itself
Mm,
in how you raise your kids, how you interact with your neighbors. And that's just, I feel sad for them. I sometimes felt suffocated in those situations because I didn't have any baggage and I didn't understand that I could just be where I can just run around anywhere. It's just always, now I'm trying to be more understanding of it. And then you said something about how people in America, they're sometimes unaware of the conflict going on in the world because you're living in a more peaceful environment. Although you can possibly argue that things have started to go bad here with mass shootings and stuff. But I really value. I am so happy that I found a place where I could just exist and not worry about these things. I think that matters
Mm.
to me a lot. So I'm glad that America was unaffected by it. That means that I could come here and I could enjoy the
Mm.
same peace. Which is
Yeah,
sad that I couldn't enjoy
sure.
that at my home, but I'm here.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I wanna come back to kind of your move to America and how you currently experience America. But I also kind of wanted to get a sense of um, what what your schooling looked like growing up, because I know from conversations we've had in the past that that looks quite different in India than it does in America. Can you talk just a little bit more about what schooling looked like when you were growing up?
Yeah. Oh my God. Schooling. Schooling was, um, how they say it sometimes. Oh, I'm forgetting the idiom here, but there's a metaphor for how if you're ignorant, sometimes that leads to happiness. So I think something
Yes.
that was my school life.
Mhm.
I was ignorant of how schooling could be, how pedagogy, different forms of pedagogy, or how schooling should be or must be. So I just loved school. And also school for me, beyond even the education, was a place wherein there weren't as many restrictions as there were at home. Now you might think, oh, it's a
Mm.
school, there would be more restrictions than home. But trust me, not in my case. I would love to go to school, get through the studies, and then the most important part, I got to play outside, which was really something
Mm.
that I couldn't do at home because my parents, having seen carrying over that trauma, especially my mom, she really wanted me to study and get to a better place. So
Mm.
any waking moment when I was at home, I was either being well fed, uh, well rested, or you know what, why aren't you studying even more? So that was the whole conversation at home. School was really super fun, but just to give the you and the audience some of context. So there is no concept of electives in schools, which I guess it's not here as well, but you stay in a classroom and the teachers come to you, which is, I guess, is a very, very basic fundamental difference to begin with. Here, you have, oh, I'm in this teacher, and this teacher has XYZ room, and I'll go to that room to go get educated by that teacher. In our school, it was you sit in for whole grade, first grade, second grade, up and until 12th. You sit in a classroom and teachers come to you. Asking questions is encouraged, but only so much. There is a set curriculum which needs to be followed. You're tested every other week. There is less emphasis on let's go learn on a field trip, let's go do whatever. I think those things come into play, but they are very far and few. So essentially, it's a very structured and defined template that you follow. And then while they say, it's a generic line to throw, school doesn't create leaders, school creates followers, I believe that is more so the case in such education systems, like back in India. And to so much so they've recognized it. I think few years ago, not too recently, they actually have started giving children more option as they get into high school age group. So, but yeah, going to school, it was teachers had liberty to smack you. I myself have been smacked 2, 3 times, and for trivial things, just for walking in the corridor when I was not supposed to. And while I had a very good
Mm.
reason to walk, and when I explained it to him, he was like, oh, "Okay, don't do this again." But by that time, I already been smacked twice. So things like that would
Right.
happen, and you just took it. You just took it. If you just took it,
Mhm.
you were happy that, oh, I only got 2 smacks. I didn't get caned.
Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Sure. Well, it sounds like, yeah, it from my perspective at least, it sounds like there was freedom in your school and or in your schooling and for for the years that you were in India and going to school, that it sounds like there was relative freedom between between being in school uh, and then going home. But it also sounds like that freedom was relatively limited. And yeah, you know, we would get in America going to public school, you would get in trouble for you know, for whatever minor infraction it was, maybe get sent to the principal's office, but it was never something where you would get smacked or hit with a cane. So is quite a difference, I think, to hear that, you know, there was freedoms, right? But it was there was a limit on those freedoms.
Yeah. I just want to share a small funny incident, which is at that moment was not funny at all, if I may, if
Yeah.
about this matter. Yes. So it's like smacked by this teacher, right? For just walking. I just had a free period. The teacher had told us, you know what, half of you who have already given the test, or I don't remember, you could just walk around. So I was just walking around for that, and he just decided to smack me. So it's just like a small incident. But here's another one. Super. So it was the end of recess period. I was walking back to my classroom, and this is like you have to imagine there were like 3,000 kids in my school, and then
Hmm.
imagine this scenario: everybody rushing back to their classes. They're like swarms of kids all around. This librarian comes out of the library, starts walking in front of us like a good 15 yards away, suddenly turns around, starts walking towards us. One of my buddies, there's four of us, starts walking towards the teacher and says, "Oh, good afternoon, ma'am," because it's like 12 noon or something. She slaps
Hmm.
him. No idea. Two of my friends seeing it
Hmm.
just start to run. They just abandon him. I thought, hey, and I'll ask the teacher what's going on. So I went up to her and I said, "Hey, ma'am, what happened?" And she asked me, "Are you with him?" I said, "Yes." And then before I could say anything, I got smacked once or twice. And then for the next 30 minutes, she didn't let us enter the classroom. We were standing outside the library crying and asking what happened. And she said, "You know what you did." And I said, "What did we do?" And she said, "No, you whistled at me." And I was like, "Who?" I still don't know how to whistle, by the way. I don't know whether the other friend did or not. He for sure didn't whistle. Somebody did something somewhere, and that whole situation escalated to my dad being called into the school, which mind you was really far away for because I was indisciplined. Because at the end of the day, as a student, you had no um, sort of agency to even plead your case, and I had to write an official letter saying sorry that I'll never do this again. And to this
Wow.
date, I cannot whistle.
Huh.
So yeah, so that's one of like that you could
Yeah.
like that could cause a trauma because you were simply walking and you could fall into like that. So you have to be super careful of your surroundings. It didn't happen often, but even if it happens two times to you, you are like, okay, fine, I can get in trouble for anything. And I was one of the good kids. I was known to be doing academically well, so I would get away with a lot of things, but you could only get away with so much.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. And I can imagine, you know, already coming from, um, you know, sort of a place of trauma and being in this environment in the greater community that has so much trauma. You know, to come into a place where, you know, you want to learn and you want to kind of better yourself, and then having all of these um, smaller incidents happen while you're trying to learn is um, was a, you know, I'm sure is quite a lot to handle. Um, did you feel, so you generally feel though like you got a good education through that schooling system, even though there were points where you didn't feel great about being disciplined or what you couldn't do? You generally feel like you got
Yeah,
a decent education.
yeah, no, for sure. I think in that moment, I did definitely respect it. I still respect it. I think in hindsight, there are certain behaviors or they could maybe have allowed us to experiment more. But given the situation, given what my parents could afford to do at that time, I think that was the best thing I could get my hands on, and I'm very fortunate
Mm,
I did, because it did somewhat shape me to be the person I am today.
sure. When you came to the States, what did that? I know you said a bit already, and you and I have talked about this some, but what can you talk about some of the big differences between schooling in India and the schooling that you received in Arizona, in the States?
Yeah, yeah. So I went to the Yale College of Management for my master's in MIS. Honestly, night and day. I loved my college time here. I did my uh, master's degree in 3 semesters, essentially 1.5 years. I could have done it for two, but then given the fact that it would have meant paying tuition for one more semester, I chose to get it done earlier and then, start earning. It was it was so refreshing. It was initially it just was unbelievable that
Mm,
you could interrupt a teacher who obviously is like, we had some teachers. There was one teacher, I'd like to take his name, Faiz Kareem. And there were so many others. He's a known legend in the whole database courses uh, field. He was just so amazing, and you could interrupt him in middle of his sentence. And sometimes when kids would do that initially, or my fellow classmates, I would be like, "Oh my God, why are they doing it?" And he would be like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead. What's your question?"
mm,
And then he would not let go before you had your questions answered. And that was the same for a lot of other teachers. Um, so many good teachers. And I actually had to go ask my program coordinator. I asked her, I said, "Hey, what's going on? How long are they going to keep up the nice act before they start yelling at us?" And she's like, "No, so it's not a nice act. It's just how it is.
mm.
Questions are important. I think teachers will probably think you're not learning if you're not asking questions. So you need to ask questions. You just don't need to ask questions for the sake of it, but ask questions." And that just, I remember getting a second-hand feeling of mild euphoria, that I'm so grateful I got to have this opportunity here. Just and in general, compared to my undergrad and school, grad school was more flexible. I mean, when it got ugly, it got busy, but it was more along the lines of, "Oh, you have to do it," rather than, "I'm asking you to do it and you need to follow it." You always had good reasons when you were busy. And I wouldn't change anything about it, but I just felt really happy. I felt like I was getting education in this truest sense. I know things could be better. I could still point out a few things, but night and day compared to what I did. And then there was the first time in my life I thought, "Oh my God, it would be great to get a PhD, like study more." And then, but then obviously, that was just a thought in my head. Just the fact that I could think about getting a PhD, because that would mean studying more. I think that's a huge achievement, because I was pretty sure that I want to get this master's degree done in a year and a half and never look at a textbook again. I think that
Sure.
speaks volumes to like
Mm,
how highly I think of the environment.
sure. Yeah. Um, yeah, I think that I remember conversation we had several months ago just about, yeah, that in India, in your schooling there, not really being able to question the teacher, just kind of taking what they say, um, and kind of internalizing that without questioning whatever that teacher's saying. And yeah, in America, um, being able to question it. And I think that not just in a school system, but as part of a larger society, one of the things that creates a really healthy and just and democratic society is that you're able to question things, and that you almost like you have the responsibility to question things. And how do we get to a more just and equitable society, if we're not asking questions, if we're not challenging authority? And so I think that that starts in the school for all of the problems that we're facing in this country. The fact is that right now, at least in a lot of places, not everywhere, but right now in a lot of places in our country, we're still able to kind of push back and still ask questions. Again, it's not a blanket statement, but I think it does still apply in a lot of areas in this country.
Oh no, for sure. This whole just with authority for a kid growing up or in any situation before they have to enter the real world and start paying taxes. It happens either at home with your parents, and the next stop is school, where the teacher is in a position of authority. And if that person who has all the power, all the authority, welcomes questions, it just sets a really good precedence for the
Mm,
rest of your years. It just gives you that confidence at a really young age that, oh my God, yeah, here is this person who's basically can fail me or can give me not good marks or just like not entertain me at all and be fine with it, won't affect his job or their job. But if you get to question them, that just gives you that that just sets the base. I think that gives you the confidence and that makes you believe, as you said, democratic values. I think that's something for me. I got to experience that after 25 years of not a lot of questioning. I mean, there were sure, if I'm being honest, there were a few teachers in India as well who behaved like that, but they were far and few in between. But I hope it might
sure.
change. I mean, my last schooling experience is like now 10 years ago in India, so I hope things are
Mm.
changing slowly.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, it's always going to be a gradual process. In some places it's going to happen more than it is. It's going to happen more quickly than it is in other places. Um, there's many examples around the world where things, sort of come to a standstill and then they slowly get going again. But yeah, I think again the thing that we're obligated to do is just to be asking questions. I think looking back in my own schooling and thinking about the best teachers that I had, um, I mean, in elementary school, high school, um, at studying at university, the best teachers were the ones who were facilitating discussion between students and between students and the professor, who were allowing kind of open discussion and weren't really uh, giving strict boundaries as to what could and couldn't be talked about, but putting stuff out there and then letting whatever discussion um, take its course.
Yeah. I'd like to ask you, how many kids were there in your classroom when you would study?
So, do you mean
In school, in
like
primary
elementary?
school, middle school? Yes, I mean
So I
just a
would,
rough ballpark in each ways.
yeah. So I think in most of my classes in elementary school, there were probably about 30 of us. And that probably held
Hmm.
true in high school too. I mean, we were at a certain point, you in at the end of elementary school, I guess what you would call middle school in a lot of places. So seventh and eighth grade, sixth, seventh, and eighth grade is when you would start
Hmm.
moving classroom to classroom, and you would have different teachers for different subjects. And then in high
Hmm.
school, you're obviously moving you're moving classrooms for every subject. But I would say
Hmm.
for the most part, it was between 20 and 30 kids in each classroom. And then in in college, it kind of varied really kind of wildly. You have these
Hmm.
big lecture halls with 100 students, and then you would have much smaller classes with maybe 7 or 8 students. So it really, in the university world, I think it kind of varies quite a bit.
I
Yeah.
that's I mean I just wanted to understand like individual I because I was always wondering like why are teachers in India like this? I think one of the reasons why they have to uh, perhaps behave like this would be, and I'm not finding excuses for their behavior, they still could be better, but I have never
Mm.
been in a classroom with less than 60 kids, and number has gone to 80, 100.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's just, I also feel how much burden are you putting on an individual? Like
Sure. Sure.
if you're putting 60 young kids to a teacher, I think they would do
Mhm.
the bare. Then it becomes about the lowest common denominator. Like, what can I do so that everyone falls in line, and then I don't have to like. I don't have time to maybe cater to every individual's creative spark.
Sure.
But yeah, I
No,
guess that's
exactly.
the
I think,
that's why I'm afraid of education here in this country as well. Like I think we should invest more so that kids get all the
yeah, oh,
attention.
for absolutely. Yeah, it's always the private schools and the charter schools, I think, generally speaking, when you
Hmm.
have when you have the funds and you have the resources, you can have smaller classrooms, you can have smaller classroom sizes, and of course, if you only have 6 or 7 kids in a class, then you can really focus on each student, what each student needs, what each student's capabilities are. If you're sitting in a class
Hmm.
of 60 students, you're just trying to get through as much material that they need to have prepared for an exam, right?
Mm.
So you're trying to get as much out there that you can without worrying about each one of those 60 kids within a 50-minute class or something like that. So I
Hmm.
think it really just varies depending on what the resources are, where you are in the country, where you are in the city. It can really vary wildly. um, I want to go back. You just about your decision to come to America from India. What were and I'm sure in what you've said in the past 15, 20 minutes is kind of part of it. But are there other big reasons that America seemed like one of the top places that you wanted to be outside of India?
Yeah, it's a great question. I always think about it. Um, and then I get asked this as a question that why America? Um, and I think there could be many reasons why. Hey, the dollar is strong, more employment
Mhm.
opportunities, more
Sure.
socialization opportunities. I mean, I used to date back home in India as well, and it never really, I would say like after a certain age when I started dating, and I started dating pretty late, I was more focused on the education side. But in college, when I started dating or anything, I always could find a partner. But here it allowed me to engage socially or just talk to women in a way that wherein there weren't expectations. Like in India, if you talk to a girl because of how you're socially conditioned, you are almost always thinking about commitment. It could be the
Mm,
first or second date. And the girl also seeks that. And it's a very weird dynamic. So I'd like to get into it for a minute. And it's changed. It has changed oh so much for in the last 10 years. But what I caught the tailwind of those behaviors was, oh, you're dating someone? Yeah, we are obviously committed after the first, second date. And eventually, after 2, 3 years, you realize, oh, we're not meant to be together. So then we break up and you quash all those plans. But those plans always need to be in place because otherwise, people, or especially women, would feel that guilt that, oh my God, they're doing something wrong. I think the way you date somebody is by saying that, no, I'm committed to this person for life. So that makes us dating good, valid. And then eventually, after years, you break up. So that leads to more deeper heartbreaks in India because people tend to make lifelong commitments within the first and second date. And then obviously, when you break up, it's a deeper pain is felt that, oh my God, my life is shattered.
right.
That's something I don't want to dwell into. But whereas in here, it's much more simpler. You know what? We're dating, we'll see how it goes. Doesn't work out. All right, do peace out or,
Mm,
whatever. So that's number
sure.
one, socially. The other one is, I feel that's one thing that I want to highlight. I keep telling my partner as well. I think people in America don't realize America gets mentioned a lot in other countries, especially in countries like India or developing countries. Because A, there is always the influence of, oh, look at the West or look at the developed countries, that's where we want to be. So there's an aspirational factor. The second factor is if something is working in America or somebody from an American culture has done something which has worked, it can be used as an example to get things done in India. Like, for example, that could be as small as a day to day affair in somebody's home, or it could be a major social initiative. As an example, if NGO or non governmental organizations or non-profits worked in America, it would give agencies, or they implemented a scheme which worked in US. they can take that scheme and implement it in India, get political support for it, saying that, oh, look, it worked here. So that it gives them some sort of agency. And in smaller things as well, like, hey, mom, I want to keep my room locked, or I want to study books 30 minutes a day because an American professor in his study said that, hey, studying 30 minutes a day is super good. So what that does is, and why I bring all of this up, is it all automatically creates a fascination for this country,
Mm,
wherein in news as well, every once in a while, if you go through a news channel or any news channel in a given day, I would say there are at least 3 to 4 America references, for good or for worse. Lately, they have been kind of like for the worse, but
sure.
it's still it has been referenced all over. Whereas if you look at American news channels, they don't reference any other country. I mean, unless there's a major conflict going on. So I think
Right,
in my
right.
psyche, America was built up as a place to be, or place where things are happening. So that's number one. Number
Mm,
two, I have a couple of my cousins who are here who had already been here. So they had kind of taken away the fear of the unknown. You know, sometimes what keeps you from taking giant leaps is, oh my God, I don't know what will happen. But because I had 3 cousins here who had been here for 20 years, 10 years, 5 years, they had done well for themselves. That also gives you that security that, you know what, I have somebody to call. Even though I went
mm,
in Arizona, those folks were in Boston, New York, New Jersey, and Texas, far away from me. But it's still, that psychological safety is a big thing. So I think those two would be the main regions: the safety, the chance to be more independent. I was obviously influenced a lot by American Hollywood, essentially. Used to watch a lot of movies and TV shows. I used
mm,
to love, I used to follow. I was very much into the pop celebrity culture, which actually decreased when I came here because I started doing other things in life. But we have spoken about our movies, my love for
mm,
movies,
yeah.
of us
Yeah.
discussing something here and there, music. So yeah, I would say those are the top few reasons.
Yeah. So do you feel, and you feel like generally speaking, uh, these reasons that you had for moving here, um, that they've kind of held true since you've been in America? Have those things, has it felt right essentially living here? Have those things, has the country lived up to your expectations, let's say?
Um, in
That's a
some ways,
loaded
I would say it
question.
has exceeded my loaded question. Yeah, I'm trying to think about it. See, here's how I think about it. In some ways, it has even exceeded the expectations I had in terms of
Mm,
freedom, in terms of what you need to do. Education was a huge revelation, as I mentioned earlier. Um, just experiencing what you think might happen and then experiencing it is also in itself is a very much more liberating factor. Like, as an example, if you think that, oh my God, if I go to XYZ place and there things will be better, you can think what better things would be like, but you cannot really know once you've experienced that. So all the good parts
mm,
of it, individual freedom, ability, like not worrying about what other people are going to say, just seeing people live their best lives by being authentic. I think that was very refreshing. Some things were um, not so great as well. Like, I couldn't, like, I had no idea about the homelessness problem. And I know it's not a recent problem,
mm,
it's been forever. I was ignorant of it. We definitely weren't told about it back home. The first time I saw a homeless person in Tucson, Arizona, where it was the first city I landed, I almost wanted to go talk to them and be like, hey, where is your home? Like, what happened? Can I help you go back home? Because it didn't register into my mind that like anybody could be homeless in this rich country. So
mm,
that was a bit of a shocker. I would say that broke the bubble quite a bit. The
mm.
polarization that has happened recently, that is a bit challenging to accept. But again,
Sure.
it is what it is. I would still say, I mean, I've been in this country for 6 years now. I'm still in my honeymoon phase with the country. I see the issues, I see what can be improved. But hey, I come from a country with 1,000 more issues, if not more. So
Mm,
these
mhm,
issues
mhm.
seem manageable. I would love for this country to course correct so that, we have 100 issues right now, they don't become 1,000 issues. But that's how I see it. So I would mostly say, yeah, my review would be positive with its own
Yeah,
shortcomings here and there.
sure. I mean, I think yeah, as a white man, I think
Hmm.
I'm incredibly spoiled. Grew up with all the privileges that I did, and still am just incredibly privileged in a million different ways.
Hmm.
But it's it's nice to hear that that you have so many things that you appreciate about this country, coming from the country that you came from, and
Hmm.
that you're saying, even though there's these things that give you cause for concern, um, compared to compared to India, they seem relatively manageable.
Yeah, and I don't see it as thinking that oh India is in some ways less or anything. I think the fact of the matter
Mm,
is India is has been independent only for 75 years. Like we have had 75 years to get our shit together, and then America has what 240, if not more, somewhere there and thereabouts. They've been its own country
yeah,
for 240 years. These a lot of the education system we were talking about, or this authority not questioning authority, is learned behavior from our formerly imperial masters. Because back in the day,
mm,
when the British were ruling in India, we got independence in 1947. They were the authority figures. So, like when my grandfather was born, India was still under British rule. So that's how recent it is, just for context, right? My dad was born in 1960, and at that time, India only had been independent for 13 years. So
right,
that's the kind of numbers we're talking about. So that colonial
sure,
hangover was the one wherein you can't question authority, you can't do anything, and it makes me have while it I can feel sad for myself that why did I still grow up in colonial hangover? We could get over it quickly. But I think what is good in India is that people are starting to realize that and starting to move away from it. But
mm,
in some ways, I feel it's still great that I got to experience those psychological hardships because that makes me appreciate the freedom here even more. And that makes me want to fight for the freedom here. That, hey, you have a good thing going on, don't lose it. This is kind of as
yeah,
good as it gets before if you
hmm,
start questioning it and you start doing something drastic with it, the other alternatives are will will frighten you as well.
sure. Yeah, and it is something to to I say this with some hesitation, but to take pride in the country that we live in, because it is the world's oldest democracy. Um, I think I think people don't realize, at least in my humble opinion, I think people don't realize how quickly we could devolve into a fascist state, with the next presidential election. But I think as of now,
Mhm.
we're still the longest running democracy in the world, and again, it's refreshing to hear from someone who has experienced a completely different world, a completely different government and style of life halfway around the world, and have only been here for 6 years, but to still, I mean, that's longer than a honeymoon period. I think, obviously
Yeah.
you'll see more and more, that needs to be that needs to be improved upon and fixed. And you've already mentioned a couple of those things, but I think to be here for 6 years and be able to still see all the really great things about this country is pretty impressive.
No, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I feel like a lot of these discussions, even at my last, about being with my colleagues or people, again, white Americans in general, they would complain about how the food is not great, how the spinach or cabbage or salad they had in Greece was so much more healthier and so much more tastier. I was like, yes, that is true, and we should improve those things here. And then they'll look at me and they'll be like, "Oh, what do you think? Like, you must think it's so crazy this country." I said, "You know what? It is, but as I said earlier, let's fix the crazy while it's manageable, as opposed
Sure.
to just like giving up agency and be like, oh my god, this country is going to shit." There are a lot of ways
Mm,
you could go to shit and much more scarier ways. So yeah, I think for that I'm grateful and I hope this country always encourages. talent to come in. This country always encourages skill to go up. There is less of people just getting ahead based on inheritance or anything, stuff like that. I think if as long as this current country keeps prioritizing merit, it will float through because this country was built on merit, as per my humble understanding, with a little bit
Sure.
of corruption here and there. But yeah.
Yeah, right, right. More and more every day. um,
More and more at higher levels, which you and I don't realize.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's always been there, right?
Mm-hmm.
This in a lot of ways the country was built on corruption, but you strive towards something better, and it takes a whole lot
Yeah,
of people to make that happen. Um,
absolutely.
you're happy here though, generally speaking. You're not gonna move back anytime soon.
A great question. No, for now. I think I just from a you know personally, I'm planning to be with somebody who's from this country, so that's obviously that pull to be here.
Mm,
Um, Work-wise as well, I like the work I'm doing. I want to love it more. And the other option is to just try different things. I feel like right now, with not a lot of family responsibilities in terms of kids or anything, I think it's a great opportunity for me to just go ahead and try different things, um,
mm,
which is something I want to try, and that'll keep me here for a while. And there's something else I want to share now, which is now blanking, but there's another reason. I might bring it up if I remember in due course. But yeah, there's one more reason I want to stay. Yeah, the other things. I've, I've been taking improv classes at Second City.
mm,
Like to, I ran the Chicago Marathon, raised money for the collective, got to meet
mhm,
interesting people. One of them is you and Maggie. And then it's just forming those close friendships and just being able to do whatever I want without having that lens judging me is just so refreshing that I don't see a good reason why I should leave it.
mm.
Unless something else. You never
And
say
you feel
never,
like
right?
those
Never say never.
things, yeah, you feel like those things were much less possible in India.
Absolutely. I still feel the after effects of that lens coming
Hmm.
here, even though I'm like literally seven seas away. And most of it is psychological. If I just shun it, I just shun it. But it's easier for you to say that. But the connections you have, the uncles, the aunts, the family, the cousins, it's just so hard for you to just say, you know what, bye bye. I'm just my own independent person because you have had shared good moments with them as well. And in general, academically as well, or not academically, even job wise, it is totally possible for a liberal arts degree holder in this country to be a musician or be a doctor, be an engineer, be a product manager, be a pilot, be whatever the heck they want it to be.
Mm, hmm.
But I would say that percentage of people who, let's say, come out of a liberal arts degree and then do something STEM related or anything else that's not liberal arts or not teaching is would be like in a minuscule percentage. I'm talking 0.001% kind of territory
Yeah.
here. You are your
Mm,
past, who you are, what you do, unless you there's no institutional support for you to get through it. There is less societal lens is fixed on, oh, if you're an engineer, you did computer science, you'll do computer science next. I cannot say that, oh, I have
mm,
done information systems and now I want to dwell into sales as an example. They would, if they would, they would, nobody would be encouraging of such a move, and if they would literally put you at the bottom of the bottom rung. And I know whenever you're changing
mm,
work streams, you start at the bottom, but there are certain transferable skills that go in between these jobs. I think there's more recognition of those skills here than in India. Again, it's changing, but less opportunities. Like it's not impossible in India. The as people say, what's the size of the pie is now started to increase. It's still pretty smaller.
mm.
So that's how I would put it. Less amount of opportunities.
Sure, gotcha. Yeah, there is, I think, generally speaking, a lot of different things you can do here, and I think it has become much less for our generation. It has become much less career based, or at least there's one path that you're kind of stuck on. Um,
Hmm.
and you can do like several, like I do several different things, in my quote unquote career.
Hmm.
But yeah, I do think there's just, you can really kind of go out and try out a bunch of different things and find the thing that works for you.
Do you feel that agency that people had, or that drive to try different things and then just end up doing what they love, or in a field that speaks most to them amongst others, because you don't always have to love your job? Do you feel, given the how the wages haven't increased in proportion to the inflation, how there are some fields, I would say my field, tech field pays a lot of decent salary. I think, well, I mean, there are other fields that they pay good salary as well. I know these days, if you go to a trade school, become an electrician or a plumber, if you're really good, you can grow a really good business that'll pay you hundreds of dollars an hour. Um,
Right.
but do you feel, given the how the wages aren't keeping up with the inflation, more and more people would be less inclined to do just whatever they want, and they might have to make a practical decision that, oh my God, you know what, I need to feed my family. Like, as an example, I know at least 2 to 3 teachers who would make great teachers, but they're leaving their field because it doesn't pay enough, and that saddens.
Sure.
That should sadden all of
Yeah,
us.
I think I think that's a really big problem. I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, myself included. I think I have my degrees in piano performance. I'm by trade a classical
Mhm.
musician, but does that really pay the bills? No. Um, so I think there's this American um, turn of phrase, I guess, if you want to call it, of follow your dreams. You can do whatever you want, but
Mhm.
in reality, is that feasible long term? Can you create something permanent and support your family at the same time, and also do what you love? I think more often than not, that's probably not the case. Um, so I think that's a really good question, because I do think we get told in America that we can really do whatever we want. Um, to an extent, that's true. Like I was just saying a few minutes ago, there's all these different paths you can choose from, but obviously some are much more lucrative and, I think, beneficial to really creating something permanent for yourself and your family.
No, I agree, and I think that's where, and one of the things in this country, I feel minimum wage or just more equitable distribution of profits is something that people need to seriously look at, irrespective of whether
Mm,
you're a Democrat or a Republican or anything, or a Libertarian, because what that does is, apart from anything, it just allows a more eclectic mix of individuals in a society. Like, which
mm,
again, going back to our example of India, only post 2010 have people started exploring slightly other avenues through the advent of internet. So people have started becoming comedians. People have started becoming some songwriters have popped up, like things, social media popularity, right? Because you no longer need a production company to fund you. If you're lucky enough and you keep putting in the work, you might get popular on internet, and that'll be good enough. That wasn't the case in the 90s in India. That wasn't the case in, like, those. There were artists, they were great artists, they were great people who wanted to love what they wanted to do, but they were always in pockets, in certain small segments.
mm,
It wasn't that they were spread across. Um, but here, like in my social group, I would say within a 5 mile area, I know people who are doctors, I know people who like you pianists, I know therapists, I know somebody who likes to dance, I know somebody who likes to teach, I know somebody who is in the government. And that is a sign of a much more healthier society, that all these different people can coexist in the same zip code.
hmm Yeah.
because there's so much to learn and know from each other. And that, but if there's increasing wage gaps or there's increasing affordability issues, then that leads to sort of an artificial segregation that only this age group income can live in certain areas. And then you're surrounded by a bunch of people.
Sure.
And then if you're surrounded by a bunch of people who think like you, talk like you, and are in the same field, then you're essentially an idiot at the end of the day. You might be a rich idiot, but
Sure.
or a well-off idiot, but you'll be an idiot.
Right. Right. No, I think that's a great point, and something that you have been speaking to in the past hour that
Mhm.
we've been talking. Just and something that, again, I think we take for granted is that in this country, at least, is that there is such a mix of people that live here that I don't think you find really anywhere else in the world. And I think it's, it makes this country so special in a lot of ways, even though there are a lot of problems and a lot of things that could go could go horribly wrong in the years to come. But
Mhm.
it's really nice to be reminded of the things that are really positive and really special about this place, for sure.
No, for sure. Yeah. I mean, again, yeah, I always believe keep highlighting the positive while also focusing on the negatives. It doesn't have to be end all be all. That hey, it sucks or hey, it's awesome, because it's never really the case. Like,
Right.
what? Tell me one thing which absolutely sucks all the time, or something that absolutely is amazing all the
Sure.
time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's how I feel.
Oh, absolutely. All right. Well, we got to wrap up here, but thank you so much for being here and talking with me. I always love conversing with you and getting your thoughts and opinions on things. We'll have to do it again sometime, but yeah, thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you for inviting me. This is, I mean, it's the first time I ever had a conversation like that. It's good to, and it made it so much easier that I know you. It's good to do it with a good friend. And then again, thank you for
Sure.
inviting me. I'll be happy to come back.
All right. Yeah. All right. Thanks very much.